Hello and welcome back to plantcare.club where we care about your plants. My name is Fred, and on this show we will answer your questions and we will talk about your plants, whatever you got, indoor, outdoor, whatever you have. We did a lot of outdoor stuff all leading up to the spring. Now we're doing a little bit more indoor plants and products. And on the last episode, at the beginning, I explained the plan is to do some more specific varieties for the next little bit. So today we've picked Ficus Bambino, which really can apply to Ficus lyrata most of the time. I think that the two, one applies to the other. Why am I qualified to talk about plants? This is because I am the co-owner of a greenhouse in Ontario, as well as a nursery in Homestead, Florida. So at these places we grow poinsettias, garden mums, spring annuals, everything from like 4-inch all the way up to 20-inch patio pots. We do some tissue culture with tropical plants, indoor house plants, Ficus Bambino, Philodendron Birkin last week, a lot of those varieties in there. And in Florida, we grow Mandevilla, Kimberly Queen Ferns, Majesties, pineapple, banana, direct sun grown plants. And we ship these plants across Canada and the United States to most of the time garden centers and grocery stores. So the goal is to take the information that we have in the greenhouse and the nursery world and explain how you can apply that to the plants in your own home. That's the goal. That's the plan. So last week we did the Philodendron Birkin, as I just mentioned. And before we start with this, after that one finished, I looked up this. I finally found the correct picture. If you are watching this, you can see a little hoop that is inside of a greenhouse. So if I'm describing it, you have your greenhouse structure. Inside of the greenhouse, you have another little greenhouse that you've created. It's got some wires holding up a piece of plastic. There's plastic on the bottom, and it's like a really humid, hot chamber that you're creating in order to propagate certain types of plants that are susceptible to heat and humidity and wind. They don't want to be dehydrated. They're really sensitive. A lot of these tropical plants will fall into tropical and indoor house plants fall into that kind of a category. Anything that comes from tissue culture, you really have to baby in that way. So you can see this guy is unzipping a little hoop here to allow some more airflow inside of this chamber. And inside of that chamber, you're going to have a lot of little baby plants. Most of the time, they come from labs overseas. At least in our situation, I don't know what he's growing. It says Good Fruit Farmer, so I don't know what they use this for on the fruit side. But that is the process that gives you a visual and idea of what it actually looks like. Okay, back to Ficus Bambino. Now I mentioned that because we would use the same process in the greenhouse that I described last week on the last one. It's a hoop inside. If you want more details on it, listen to the last episode. I don't want to bore you again with all of those details. What I will do, though, is explain how you can apply this to your own plant. So if, first off, you have a Ficus Bambino, just like this, and you want to propagate it into your own plant, you would take the top right up here at the growth point, and you would snip off the top of it. And then from there, you are going to plant that into a smaller section of dirt, or you could set it in some water and try to encourage some roots to come out that way. The way that we usually do it is you put it straight directly into some dirt, and you're going to baby it along, keep it a little bit misted, a little bit moist so that the leaves can still survive. It doesn't dehydrate itself. It's still alive while the plant is going through first shock and then figuring out, okay, I'm okay, I'm alive here. How do I move forward? And once it's in that how do I move forward stage, it'll start to shoot roots out of the bottom. You're going to probably see them coming from the between the bottom of the stem to the first leaf. Sometimes you'll see some that go from the first leaf to the second leaves in those nodes. They can stretch out from there and reach down to the soil as well. Most of the time it's at the very bottom. And if you want to do some more cuttings, with ficus, you don't just have to take the tip, you can do some of the simply leaf cuttings instead. So let's say you have a stem that's coming up, you got your main growth point on top, you take that cutting. That's probably your most charged and energetic cutting that you're going to have. And then you can take another snip, but with just one leaf and some stem. And you could do another snip with another leaf and stem and tick, 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 all the way down. All the way down here, you could probably get 10 cuttings. As many leaves as you have, you could do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, probably 6 cuttings just out of this plant right there. Now the other plants, when they begin growing, the other cuttings, when they begin growing, you're going to see the new growth coming out where the leaf meets the stem. So right in that little notch, that's where you're going to see growth coming out, and that's where the plant will grow up from that point. With the tip, the growth point at the very top of the plant, you're going to see growth come right out of the top. It'll start putting on more leaves and opening up and keep growing up in that direction once it is actually rooted and moving along. So let's say now you have purchased your 6-inch or a 4-inch Ficus Bambino. You know, they will do, I have seen these in 10-inch. I have seen some people trying these out in bigger pots. And I'm going to go on a little bit of a tangent, but the reason that these are generally used for 4-inch, 6-inch, the smaller pots, is because they have the same habit as the Birkin, where they end up staying smaller, a little bit more compact, they're more easy to manage. If you use the traditional larger leaf, larger variety, Ficus lyrata, it can be an animal, and you have a short window of time to sell that plant before it gets way too big for a 6-inch. With a Bambino, it grows a little bit more slowly. The nodes in between the leaves here, as you can see here, the nodes in between the leaves are much smaller and thinner, and so it can put on leaf, 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 leaf. You don't have a 2-week period to sell that plant. You could sell it over 2 months, and it's not going to get way too big and too floppy. It's going to be the right sort of size. It's going to stay in the range that you're looking for there. But I have seen some people try them into 10-inch pots as well, with varied success. Sometimes I've seen 3 in a 10-inch pot. They grow a little bit taller, and then they're trying to create more of like a bush look. Or I've seen a single with a pinch, and then they strip the leaves off and try to make a standard out of it, which is, it would take a lot longer than a lyrata standard, and so that would be more expensive. And I don't think the look is that much better, so I don't know why they would do that, but maybe it's just trying something new, trying something different, seeing if anything different can be done there. Okay, so you've purchased your 4-inch or your 6-inch, most likely, from the store. You bring it home. What are you going to do? Where are you going to put it? First off, I would suggest putting it on the north side of your house or north side of wherever you are. If you're in like a corner office somewhere, near a window, but you don't want it to get direct sunlight for most of the day. Like let's say if you put it up against a south window, you're going to have a tough time with some of those leaves starting to burn a little bit. You're going to want to maybe put it on a side where it could get some morning sun or some late afternoon sun, but you don't want it to get that early direct sunlight. The temperature, whatever it is in your house or your environment, is going to be most likely totally fine. These plants can be relatively sturdy and stronger, and they don't need as much as specific humidity or heat. They can flow with things a little bit better, but the root systems are a bit different. For most plants, I suggest that people water from the bottom of the pot and it slowly seeps all the way up. But for ficus, usually you have to water from the top down. And this is because ficus roots will generally fill the top of the soil first and work their way down along the sides later on. But if you pulled your ficus plant out of that soil and you took all the soil right off and you just looked at the root structure and the root system, there's so many roots that sit on the very top of the soil ring, and then they work down as well, but the top is where a ton of those roots sit. So when you water a ficus, I'd suggest that you water from the top down. These plants can be pretty thirsty, so you're going to want to water it more often than you would a philodendron, or some, let's say you have a monstera sitting beside your ficus. You're going to want to water this a lot more, definitely more than, let's say, a sansevieria or anything else like that that you're working with. For indoor plants, these are probably one of the thirstiest ones, which means that if you were going to up pot it, let's say you're going to take it from a 4-inch to a 6-inch, or you wanted to go from like a 6-inch to a 8-inch pot or something like that, I would try to use a little bit heavier soil around the outside rather than really light fluffy stuff. That heavier soil is going to hold on to water a little bit better and for longer, which this plant might need. Now, a common problem that people have with ficus is that they will start losing leaves. This is something that everyone goes through that I've ever known or really seen. Bambinos lose leaves a little bit less frequently as a lorata, but especially up here in Canada in the winter, it's tough on these plants. They go from having, like right now in the summer, they might have 14 hours, 16 hours of sunlight during the day. And then by the time you get to the winter, they could only have 6 or 8. So it's a huge shock for this plant. And the plant is used to being, I always think of Costa Rica as like the perfect environment for this plant. So when you have such short days, the plant thinks, I don't need all of these leaves to survive, so I'm going to get rid of some of these. I'm going to drop the bottom ones. I'm going to keep on growing. I want to put on new leaves up top, so I don't need 14 leaves. I can drop one on the bottom and put one up top. And that's kind of its trade-off that it's trying to do in the winter most of the time. If you see that, that's normal. That's just how these plants grow. They always want to continue growing up, shooting for the light, getting bigger and bigger. If you see some edges of the leaves that are starting to go brown and burning, this could either be too much sunlight or it could be a nutrient deficiency. I would suggest fertilizing right away or a little bit more often. They can be susceptible to the wrong pH in your soil, as well as not enough calcium or some other smaller nutrient deficiencies. So you got to keep the fertilizer up in your own home. You got to keep pumping it to these plants. I'd say once a month, do some liquid fertilizer for your ficus. And if you really get to a spot where you're fertilizing, you put it in the right place, you've gone through all these different steps and you can't figure out what's wrong, you might have to go and check the pH of your soil by getting some. I have a show on how to check the pH somewhere. You could look it up, and it'll walk you through the steps of exactly how to do it, what you're looking for, the correct level of pH for different types of plants, all of that kind of stuff, if you get to that point. But I'm hoping that this gives you an okay. Oh, one other thing while I'm on this topic. Let's see if they have Ficus Bambino standard. If I can show you any pictures. See, that's pretty cool. This is kind of what I'm thinking. So if you have a Bambino, or really a lorata, but we're talking about Bambino here specifically. So it's growing taller. Let's say it gets on 15 leaves, and it's starting to get like a little bit floppier. Like it's getting tall, and ooh, I don't know if this thing gonna keep standing. If you want to be slightly risky, you can pinch the growth point at the top of the plant. So pinch that off. And then let's say you had 14 leaves. I would take off the bottom, let's say 10. Take off the bottom 10 leaves. And what you're left with is more of a stick. You might see a little bit right here if you're watching. There's just a stick that's pointed straight up, and then you've got all your leaves right on top. So it looks a little bit funny at the very beginning. But the plant will now continue to try to grow and move towards the sunlight, keep getting taller. So out of those 4 or 5 leaves that you've left on top, each one of them should get a growth point. So there's 4 new growth points that come out right at the very top of the plant. And from there, it's going to create a different structure. That's how growers can create this tree look where they have a bare stem all the way down, and then at the very top, they have this big ball of a bush. You can do that with a Bambino as well. And yeah, this is a great example right here. So a Bambino standard. a straight stick all the way up. You might have to get something in there to support it, like a piece of bamboo that you can stake it to because it's going to get kind of floppy, especially with more of the bottom leaves. But once it gets tall enough, yeah, you pinch that off, you let the growth come out the sides, and suddenly you have a different look, a different shape to that plant. If I missed anything, if you have any questions, you can head over to plantcare.club and ask it there, or put it in the comments, regardless of wherever you're listening to this, and we will find it and hopefully be able to answer your questions. That's all for today. Thanks.